Hello YouTube, this is Lapse of Apathy. I'm coming to you and I'm going to be talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And obviously after you watch this, if you have any doubts of what anything that I said, please I urge you to look it up. I am not going on YouTube as a demagogue. I am giving you the information of which I am presented with and the information of which I see in my everyday life. And I would strongly urge you not to look up anything that has to deal with the main media establishment because the main media establishment tends to skew it in a way that will make you believe that the left-right paradigm is actually one there that is put to give us a choice, which I have actually figured out quite a bit ago now that the left-right paradigm is complete horseshit. And it's there as a show, just like Punch and Judy. And if you do not know what Punch and Judy is, I suggest looking that up as well. Um, but anyway, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a way to establish that all of copyrighted material are owned by the main media establishment and main establishment that is set up in the United States that has help being an oligopoly by the United States law and United States regulation to ensure that smaller companies are not able to flourish within the United States. Sure, there are a few that obviously flourish within the US, but it is getting harder and harder to actually start a smaller business for people who actually are able to and actually want to start a business. Um, this was found by Business Insider, and this is the 6 corporations that control 90%. That is a 90% of media in America. And it provides you with an infographic. And I think looking at this infographic, it really gives you a quite an idea why certain things are actually covered within cable and why certain things are not covered within cable. Um, from 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 companies. These 50 companies, obviously, there is enough competition there to ensure that everyone, a lot of people at least, get a fair share of their information being put out there. If one company does not like it, you have 49 other companies to go out and pitch your idea to, whether it be a sitcom or whether it be a documentary or something completely different. As you know, that through online and through the usage of the internet, so many individual people have a outlet to get their thoughts and ideas and opinions out online. Even though Google has taken over YouTube, the restrictions have been quite negligent over the past years that YouTube has been owned by Google. That's notwithstanding the very many DMCA violations that have been done throughout the past years on the behest of several users that are very notable within the YouTube society, and that also entails the many gaming uh, gaming channels that I'm subscribed to on YouTube. And of course, if you want to look that up, just look up Angry Joe copyright, and I'm sure you'll find some things that will give you the information of what I'm talking about. But besides that, YouTube has been a very good website for everyone to assuredly get what they wanted to get out onto the public sector, therefore growing intuition and information on a vast variety number of subjects that I believe has helped people grow not only creatively but grow intellectually speaking as well through introspection and through the of course looking at several different points of views. Anyway, consolidation, 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 corporations. As I said, 2011, that same 90% is only controlled by 6 different corporations. Now, what does this say about copyright laws? Copyright laws are those who are done by the majority of people who have the copyright to some sort of material. The most copyrighted material are owned by people who own a lot of cash. The more people, the more cash a corporation owns, the better lawyers they are able to get, the more backup they are able to get, the more fodder they're allowed to get by buying off people for their ideas. Because when it comes down to it, some people are very, very beholden to their ideas and very beholden to their own intellectual property, and some people are not, and they care more about making enough money to make a living or just getting a ton of money. And these 6 corporations are GE, General Electric, which owns Comcast, NBC, Universal Pictures, and Focus Features. News Corp, which owns Fox, Wall Street Journal, and New York Post. Disney Corporation, which was actually the one corporation who created copyright back in the 1940s, I believe. And just look that up because I'm not actually sure if it was the 1940s. I do not know the specific date, but I know that they were the main people that came up with copyright to ensure that that law was instated. That anything before the Disney Corporation was free game. And that is where Disney got most of its information, its material, and everything else like that. Any princess movie you see, any Prince movie you see, any classic Disney film that you see has been redone by those of German folklore that was known as the Grimm Brothers folklore. Most of the folklore you'll see was actually redone by horror movies. Now, I like Disney, but Disney has been known to copy those ideas and make it its own into its own individual movie, but then says that nobody else is allowed to do that about their information or anyone else who wants to instate copyright into their own works. And of course, after 1983, during at least 2011, because that is what this sheet, this infographic is stating, 2011, 6 companies controlled the entirety of all of this information on U.S. broadcast television. All of these companies own copyrights to numerous intellectual works. Not all, but numerous. And they are the ones that can control. They're the ones that can buy off. They are the ones that make sure that they own almost every single intellectual property. And if they want something, they'll go out and try to buy it from the individual who owns that copyright, or who didn't even want to get a copyright in the first place. Disney has ABC, ESPN, Pixar, Miramax, Marvel Studios. They own all of those corporations. All of these individual tiny little corporations that you see on the television and everything, they all go back to these 6 companies. So if anyone tells you, oh no, there's several different companies that are subsidiaries of these companies, you say yes, they are subsidiaries of those companies. They are beholden to their owners, and if they do not do something that their owners want them to do, they are out. Their funding is done. They are no longer able to function. Only if they were to try to fight it, which might be one of the most difficult, lawyer-intensive, law-intensive, money-intensive works that they could possibly try to achieve within their lifetimes. Another corporation that is very notable within the YouTube society, due to a lot of stress by gamers, by other individuals on YouTube, is Viacom. Viacom is MTV, Nick Jr., BET, Country Music Television, that's CMT, and Paramount Pictures. Then you have Time Warner, which owns a lot of the comic book franchises, by the way. That's why you keep seeing Spider-Man movies out number 1, 2, 3, more, even if some of them were just lousy. Like Spider-Man 2. Not the Amazing Spider-Man, the Ultimate Spider-Man 2. That was terrible, in my own opinion. You might have liked it, but that is why they keep coming out with these things. Because if they do not come out with any things, they lose their copyright. That is why your childhood is dying before your eyes. It's because these fuckers own this material and they keep putting out crappy movies that are a monstrosity. They're allowed to do it because they have the copyright, and I believe that if there were no copyright, they should be allowed to do it, and that everyone should be allowed to do it. And the best one would survive, although there are people who disagree with me. I think that is the way to go. Time Warner owns CNN. Oh, CNN, another news network. HBO, Time, and Warner Brothers. Time, of course, being the magazine that basically everyone reads, that has the Person of the Year, and Warner Brothers, obviously, being Time Warner Brothers. CBS has Showtime, which is obviously a network that many of you have watched. Many movies are on Showtime. Smithsonian Channel, NFL.com. I have no idea why anyone would go on that site, but I know a lot of people like the NFL for some reason. Jeopardy and 60 Minutes. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is that of an agreement put out by individuals who have connections in very high places. Not only that of media corporations but through many pharmaceutical industries that have a semi sort of ownership, just like the 90% of the media is controlled by 6 companies. Probably about 90 or 80% of medications is controlled by a few amount of companies, including Bayer and Pfizer and a few other ones I don't remember. You could always look it up yourself. But I know that the majority of medicine is owned by really big companies because it is expensive to make medicine, and that's why they want to make sure that they have a patent on their medicine. And patents are not necessarily the same as copyright, but they show a close similarity to them, and that is also covered by the TPP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, how do these major corporations actually have all this power? Is it through capitalism? No, it is not. Monopolies could not thrive under capitalism. Somebody else would come and say, these monopolies that own everything in the market, they are selling this for a gigantic price, and they would come about and say, oh, hey, look at me. I sell it for cheaper, and therefore more people would go to that company, therefore driving the prices down, therefore driving the value of the US dollar up. I might not be totally correct in my assumption there, but that is what I believe to be true through the information that I have gathered on the internet. Trans-Pacific Partnership is done by the United States government and by other several governments that own stakes to these companies and these corporations, which they have very close ties to. And these companies only are out for the money. And that is where people have to stop and say, the government has these companies that are with them. But then liberals will say, oh, but we need the government to help us out and help the poor people out. And then they don't look behind the scenes and say, you know what? They're not helping us out. Things aren't getting better for these poor people. Things are actually getting a little bit worse. And why are they getting worse? It's because the government doesn't give a shit about you. It only gives a shit about lining the pockets of these major corporations. I am a libertarian. I do not believe in anarchy. I do not believe that we could survive without a government. But we need a smaller government, and one that is ruled by the people, not by the corporations, and not by the corporate elite. Anything that comes out of that government is not for us. They need little power as possible. Regulations need to be destroyed through and through for centralization of power, regulation on smaller businesses, regulation on actually threatening the United States dollar, which is a fiat currency, which is continuously being printed at a 3% or 2% inflation rate by every single year. This means that the United States dollar is worth 2% less than it was the previous year of which you have earned your money. They take your taxes, they take your taxes and they put it towards programs that are supposed to help the poor, but instead help the poor be self-sufficient on money that is given them by the government, who is owning these major corporations. The minimum wage wants to be raised to $15 an hour. A lot of liberals are for it. This will not work. Why won't it work? Because these fucking big corporations, even small corporations, they do not give a shit about you. They make money, and that is the only thing that they care about. You raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, all you're going to do is that you're going to make these companies delete these people who are making $7.15 an hour and get something cheaper in there to do that work without having to pay $15 an hour. They're going to put machines in there because it is cheaper to keep up these machines than it is to pay their employers $15 an hour. And even if these employers were to make $15 an hour and they were to keep their jobs, everyone else's wages would be stagnant. And the value of the United States dollar would just fluctuate to the point where $15 an hour is the same amount of cash as it is now, with $7.15 an hour being the minimum wage, meaning that the value of the dollar will be lost. The people working at minimum wage will not gain any money, period, whatsoever. They will be in the same state that they are now, and people who make more money than $7.15 an hour, they will lose the buying power of their dollar. Not to mention the 2% interest rate that is being done as an inflation, artificial inflation, through the Federal Reserve, but is done as well through the artificial printing of money on microtransactions through the stock market. That, my friend, is why you are being fucked. And that is why liberalism isn't liberalism anymore. It is not progressivism anymore. It has been hijacked, and we are all being fucked. The only way to get out of this is to ensure that government has as little power as possible. We stop using the United States dollar, and we start our own economy and help each other out, instead of having to rely on sociopaths who are in power that are only out there to line their own pockets. You cannot fight this with their money. They have endless pockets. They have endless transactions that they are able to do. They are able to borrow this money at 0% interest rate. The dollar is not worth anything, and it will continuously lose its value as time goes on, by 2% every single year, and perhaps even more, depending on what Janet Yellen does, and depending upon how the stock market prints their money through microtransactions. If the dollar does not collapse by tomorrow, because our economy is incumbent upon the mass inflation, artificial inflation of the dollar. This has been Lapse of Apathy. I hope you've been able to stay awake during my tirade, and I hope you learned something. Bye.